the Teach Pitch podcast. We are very excited to be launching a series of interviews for Teach Pitch, a global community of tens of thousands of subscribers from over 205 countries who all have a desire to improve the state of education in this world. And for these interviews, we have selected a number of our subscribers who have achieved great things. And by great, I mean amazing. Think of former presidents, entrepreneurs, fashion designers, hospital builders, non-profit founders, authors, journalists, doctors, etc. And what all our guests have in common is that despite their great success, they've encountered many enormous challenges. So what were these challenges and how did they overcome them? That is what we are going to be talking about here. My name is Aldo de Pap and I'm massively looking forward and very grateful you can join us on this journey. So sit back, relax, and download the podcast here.
I've been asked a couple times, what do you think about the night before you have your foot amputated, you have your leg amputated? And what I thought about was those young men and some women, sitting in those ships off the coast of Normandy, France, the night before D-Day when they're going to go ashore, and how many thousands of them said, you know what, I'm going to sacrifice my life. I think of what courage that took to get into those boats and drive up to that beach. And that's such a powerful and important thing to realize that you're part of something bigger than yourself.
Motivation is the process that initiates, guides, and maintains goal-oriented behaviors. Motivation involves the biological, emotional, social, and cognitive forces that activate behavior. For this podcast series, I was looking for someone who deeply understands motivation, someone who not only gets what it means, but also has the capacity to move others towards the previously mentioned goals. And when you start looking for a motivational speaker online, you will find thousands of options. Many claims from people who say they have the power to help others. Just sign up to their site, attend their webinar, read their book, and the rest will follow. Now, I'm certain these people are doing a great job. I love people who make an effort to work with others to become more energized and to help them become the best they can be. More power to them. But when reading up about many of them, I did wonder to which degree they have been put to the test themselves. Because how much of an expert are you if your own capability of staying motivated has never really been challenged? For me personally, I've never been really tested on such a level. All things considered, I had quite a smooth ride into everything I ever wanted to do. That has most certainly not been the case for my next guest, Terry Tucker, motivational speaker and author of Sustainable Excellence. And the best way to introduce Terry is by reading the email that I received from him in getting this interview off the ground. Terry wrote to me, I bring a unique and positive bent to the idea of mental health and self-improvement. As a cancer warrior for the past 9 years, which has included the amputation of my foot in 2018 and my leg in 2020, I focus on the healthy aspect of being sick. By 1, controlling your mind so it doesn't control you. 2, embracing the pain and suffering and using it to make you a stronger and more determined individual. 3, understanding what you leave behind is what you weave in the hearts of others. And 4, remembering that as long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated.
This podcast is brought to you by Mindstone, a platform that lets you build courses curated from the best online content, helping your students learn faster and remember more. Check out mindstone.com and find out how you can get started. We're so happy to be partnering with Hee Ha Ho, an interactive video platform that enables teachers and students to easily create amazing clickable videos for learning. Check out heehaho.com. That's HIHAHO.com for more information and your free starter account. A big thank you to our friends at Zeus Maths Challenger, the only puzzle that effectively boosts your numeracy, critical thinking, and brain power. Go to CZeusPuzzles.com, that is spelled czeuspuzzles.com to get your brain buzzing. We are so excited to be working with the team Learning Ladders, the only platform that provides assessment that goes way beyond tracking to effectively support teaching and learning for EYFS, primary, and secondary settings. Go to learningladders.info to find out more.
Lots of things to discuss here, and very, very happy that you could make it to this podcast interview. A very warm welcome to you, Terry.
Thank you, Aldo. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to talking to you today.
So, Terry, I've done a lot of reading about you. We had a previous conversation, and one of the things that struck with me is your enormous positive outlook on things. You told me, I'm one of 4 podcast interviews you have scheduled for today. You just told me. You're all suited up. I wish the listeners could see us here. You're all suited up while I'm sitting here in my summer outfit, ready for our afternoon, so to say, our Thursday summer afternoon. That's not the case for you. So you're very focused and you're very determined to not only stay motivated yourself, but also to motivate others. What is basically, where does that come from? What's your source?
I think it's just a culmination of my life. I've been very fortunate in a lot of ways, but on the other hand, I've had a lot of misfortune. And I think the combination of all those things has really kind of led me to where I am right now. And in all honesty, you mentioned my cancer diagnosis. I am more than likely dying. And I don't mean that I'm in any way wanting to hasten that, but in a way, I'm almost excited to see what's on the other side of this life. And what allows me to do that is I believe I found my purpose in life and I lived it. And so for me, death isn't that scary, isn't that frightening, because I did just that. I was put here for a reason, I believe. I found that purpose, I lived it, and now it's time to move on. And that's okay. I don't know why all of us are so scared to move on. There's an old Native American Blackfoot saying here in the United States that goes like this, that I really love. It says, when you were born, you cried and the world rejoiced. Live your life in such a way so that when you die, the world cries and you rejoice. Mm-hmm. That's what I want for my life. I want to live that life, and then I want to rejoice on what comes after this. So really, my entire life has been an accumulation of allowing me to stay motivated, to stay positive, and just to keep moving forward every time I get knocked down, because we all get knocked down. We're all going to experience pain in our lives. And it doesn't have to be cancer pain or a chronic illness or anything like that. I mean, it could be something as simple as, you failed a test at school, you broke up with your boyfriend or your girlfriend, or, somebody else at your office got the promotion that you thought you deserved. Pain is inevitable. Suffering, on the other hand, that's optional. That's what you do with that pain. That's, do you want to use it to make you stronger, to make you tougher, to make you more determined? Or do you want to wallow in it and stay down in the muck and the gunk and the garbage and feel sorry for yourself and have people feel sorry for you? I just choose not to do that, and I just keep wanting to move forward.
Well, all power to you, and I'm in awe and admiration for you saying these things. But I can imagine this was not your outlook in the very beginning when you were diagnosed with cancer. And, it's a very rare form of cancer that you have been diagnosed with. So how was that at the very beginning of things?
I have bad days just like everybody else. I cry, I get down. I just don't let myself stay there. But when I was initially diagnosed, I was a girls' high school basketball coach, and I had a callus break open on the bottom of my foot. And being a coach, you're on your feet a lot. So I didn't give it a lot of thought. But after a few weeks, when it didn't heal, I went to see a podiatrist friend of mine, and he took an x-ray and he says, I think you have a little cyst in there, but I can cut it out. And he did, and showed it to me. It was just a gelatin sac with some white fat in it. Nothing that would lead anybody to believe that there was anything wrong. But he sent it off to pathology. And then 2 weeks later, he called me. And the more difficulty he was having telling me what was wrong, the more frightened I was becoming. Until finally he just laid it out. And he said, Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years. I have never seen this form of cancer. You have a rare form of melanoma that appears on the bottom of your feet or the palms of your hands. And I don't know worldwide what the statistics are. I think in the United States, there's about 6,000 people, 5,600 people that get this cancer every year. So it's incredibly rare. So that necessitated going to probably the best cancer hospital here in the United States, MD Anderson, had 2 surgeries to remove the tumor and all the lymph nodes in my groin. And when I healed, I was put on a weekly injection of a drug called interferon just to keep the disease from coming back. And what interferon did for me was gave me flu-like symptoms for 2 to 3 days every week after each injection. And I took those weekly injections for almost 5 years. So imagine having the flu every week for 5 years. Yeah. And again, that wasn't to cure me. That was just to keep the disease from coming back. And then eventually 2017, I had to stop the drug. 2018, the disease came back and I had to have my left foot amputated. 2019, a couple more surgeries. And then last year, an undiagnosed tumor in my ankle grew large enough that it fractured my tibia, my shin bone. And my only recourse right in the middle of the global pandemic was to have my left leg amputated above the knee.
I'm so sorry this has happened to you. And again, I can only repeat my admiration that you're quite chipper telling us this story. Like, it is what it is. Let's get on with the program. Where does that come from? Because, when reading your profile, when reading more about you, it's not fair to kind of only talk about your cancer diagnosis, because there's also a road before that whereby you've had a great number of jobs. And I think there's also a little bit of motivation and resilience there that could be attributed to. Am I correct?
Yeah, you are. I've had quite a few jobs. Some of them were jobs that I loved and that I wanted, and some of them were jobs that I took. When I expressed an interest in going into law enforcement as my passion or my purpose, my dad was absolutely not. You're going to go to college, you're going to major in business, you're going to get a job in business. My dad had my entire life planned out. When I graduated from college, he was sick. He was dying of cancer, and I didn't want to upset him. So I took my first job out of college, was in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the international hamburger chain, the fast food chain, in their marketing department. And then I was a hospital administrator. And it really wasn't until after my father passed away that I pursued my goals, my dreams, my desires of being in law enforcement. And I always tell, especially young people, if you have a passion for something in your heart, but it scares you, do it. Go ahead and do it. Because at the end of your life, the things that you're going to regret are not going to be the things you did. They're going to be the things that you didn't do. And by then it's going to be too late to do them. We have a novelist here by the name of Mark Twain, who had one of the greatest quotes that I ever heard. He said, "The 2 most important days of our lives are the day we're born and the day we figure out why." So I know there are people out there, I've talked to them, that somebody in their life wants them to do, to go down this road, but their passion is another road. That's a hard thing to deal with. So I think you have to find that passion in your life and live it. That's the reason you were put on this earth. And you probably know them. I know them. There's so many people who don't do that. The Shawshank Redemption movie, has that saying of get busy living or get busy dying. If you're not growing, if you're not stepping outside your comfort zones, then you're dying. So don't be that person. Get out there, find out why you were born, and live that life.
That's well put. I would say that it's not always easy to recognize. I think some people, they struggle to find what it actually is that they want to do. And it takes time to identify that because there are so many other things happening on their path, from, their family to, maybe a financial situation, or, there could be so many other factors that might dilute the clarity of, okay, here's what you need to do, here's what you want to do. But I think what you're also trying to say is make an effort to find out what it is that you want to do. So keep on searching for it until you found it.
It is. And the hard, the difficult is what makes it good. If it was easy, everybody would do it. Yeah. It's that struggle. It's that trying to figure it out that when you finally do, that's, when the light bulb goes on, that's what this is what I'm supposed to do. You know, and again, I don't want to make people think that your purpose or your passion or your why or whatever you want to call it has to be your job. I don't think it does. You know, I mean, you could have a job over here that pays the bills, but your passion is writing or volunteering or playing a musical instrument or whatever it ends up being. So don't think that your why or your purpose has to be your job. I don't think it does, but for a lot of people, I think it is.
It is, yeah. And you've described that also as your first challenge, that you need to live a life that is true to yourself. And would you say that you started living a life that was true to yourself the day you became a police officer?
I'd say when I would get up in the morning to go to work, it was, let's go. I can't wait. You know, and the other jobs I had were more, you know, they were jobs. Did I learn a lot? Yes, I absolutely did learn a lot being in business. And I met a lot of great people. And I learned some very, very good lessons, but it wasn't my passion. It wasn't something I couldn't wait to get up and go and do. And I think, you know, I've been asked, how do you know when you found that purpose? I think that's one of the ways you do. When you can't wait to get out of bed and go do whatever it is. But I'd say that's probably the start. The first time the fuse got lit and I was like, let's go.
Let's go. Let's do this. And then on your path to becoming a motivational speaker. So I read that in your law enforcement career, you were also a SWAT negotiator, which sounds like a Hollywood job. I mean, I see you doing it. Is it as exciting as it sounds?
Everything you've seen on the movies, no, it doesn't happen that way. Yes, there is a person that is negotiating, but what you don't see, and really probably is what is more important, is there's a team involved in this. So if I was negotiating with somebody, there would be somebody sitting right next to me, passing me notes, you know, on a Post-it note saying, you know, here, talk about this or ask about that or stay away from this. And then there was 3 or 4 other people who were out there trying to glean intelligence. You know, if a person was barricaded with a hostage, maybe we're talking to his mother or, you know, his wife. And it's like, what's the deal? Why is he doing this? And trying to understand the situation. You know, maybe he's mad at his mom. So, you know, I'll get a note that says, don't talk about his mom. So it's a team effort. And that's when it's on the scene. The real work, and I think this is probably true in any job, the real work, the real crux of what's going on is all the training, all the preparation that we did beforehand. And we would train with a psychologist and we'd run through scenarios and then we debrief, you know, did you think about this? How did that, you know, and sometimes you have to throw things out the window. You know, we had strategies and techniques and things that we used. I remember one time we were negotiating with a 15-year-old boy who was barricaded with a gun. And we had done everything we were thinking of, but he wouldn't engage with us. He wouldn't come out. And so we kind of took a time out. We're like, you know what, we'll call you right back. You know, it's usually on a phone. And we got together and we're like, I don't know what to do. What do you guys, and we brainstormed. It was like, he's 15 years old. Let's act as a parent. Let's scare him. So literally we broke a window and we threw in a flashbang grenade, which it's a grenade. It doesn't explode like a normal grenade does. It makes a loud sound and a bright light. And literally within 10 minutes, he was out. You know, it was just a matter of sometimes you got to do things differently. And sometimes you got to figure out, he's 15. He needs a parent. We got to act as his parent now and not as, you know, the police or negotiators. Yeah.
And kind of, I can imagine that a skill as being a negotiator, it requires a certain level of eloquence. And definitely an eloquence you need as a motivational speaker, which you obviously have. Would you say that that's where that started? Because you're quite articulate. You have absolutely no problem expressing yourself very well. How did that come about? Or was that something you were born with and kind of you took in whatever you did?
Yes, to answer your question, but I think there was something more important that I learned being a negotiator. And that was, you know, as a police officer, 99% of the time, what we did was with people face to face. And when we became negotiators, we weren't face to face with that person. We could have been a block away talking on the phone or talking through a door or something like that. So all the visual clues that we would get of being face to face, we didn't have. So we had to figure out what people, you know, what the situation was and what people, why they were in this situation. based on what people were saying, what they weren't saying, and how they were saying it. So there were times when I would negotiate with people and we'd be talking, over here about something that was going on, but the real problem was over here. And we hadn't even gotten to that yet because they hadn't burned off enough of their emotional energy. And so I thought the biggest part of that, we always got credit, you talk the person out. Really what we did is we listened the person out. We listened to what that person was saying. We asked an open-ended question. We identified feelings. So, if you're furious at your mother and I say, oh, you seem to be a little upset, I've totally missed it. I need to get down in the trenches with people, down in the muck and the ugliness. And that's what makes negotiating exhausting because, it's not just talking, you've got to get down there with them because if you don't establish trust. And that was another thing that I learned as a negotiator. And I think it's true in any relationship, whether it's, your husband and wife or your business or whatever. If people don't trust you, there's no way you're going to effectively be able to do your job or to be in that relationship. So listening and trust were two big things that I learned about that. But I also learned you got to get out there. You've got to talk to this person. And I'll be honest with you, there were times when I would be on the phone or on a loudspeaker, just trying to get somebody to pick up the phone to talk for like 2 hours. I'm talking to nobody. I'm not getting any response. I'm not getting anything back from them. That's incredibly difficult, but it's certainly something that helped me when I get up in front of groups and speak.
Wow. Yeah. So I think it's very interesting. So you're basically saying I already had the capacity to speak. That was something that went automatically, but being a SWOT negotiator taught me how to listen and how to gain people's trust, which forms a golden combination with that ability to speak. And that equals becoming a good motivator or motivational speaker as what you are today.
Exactly. And I think the listening part is even more important than the speaking part.
Yeah.
And when I wrote my book, I devoted an entire chapter to the importance of listening. And not listening like most of us do to reply, but listening to understand. Pretty much all over the world these days, we're just screaming at each other. And when we're doing that, I can't understand what you're saying and you can't understand what I'm saying. And I've been guilty of this where I've been in a conversation where, it's like, come on, Aldo, hurry up, say what you want to say because I want to get my 2 cents in here. And that's not effective. That's not an effective way to communicate. An effective way to communicate is what is Aldo saying? And why is Aldo saying what he's saying? And if you do that, then now, okay, I get that. Now let me tell you my part. And then we can have a dialogue. And when we have a dialogue, we can get so much more accomplished than just screaming at each other.
Yeah, 100%. There is a difference between saying this in theory and then being in the field and having a stressed out day and, you needing to work through loads of actionable items and wanting to do your thing. So it's it almost goes hand in hand with a certain level of patience. And I would also say that it's something that comes with a bit of maturity. Once you grow to be a little bit older and you're less hungry, less angry, maybe in a certain way, because when you're young, you kind of want the world to see you, and then at a certain point you start thinking, well, what do I want to be known for? What do I want people to see and how do I achieve that? You start looking at other dimensions, perhaps to a certain extent, and then that kicks in. It's like, where am I and how do I convey my message and who wants to listen and who do I want to listen to? So from your police career, I believe you explained to me you moved city and you changed careers again after the law enforcement. You became a basketball coach. Is that correct?
I was a basketball coach, and I also started my own company. I was a school security consultant to schools around the United States to help them improve their physical security. It was kind of the best of both worlds. As a coach, as a teacher, it's amazing the amount of impact. I mean, I think back, you probably do too. There's 1 or 2 teachers that you were like, man, that person really had a positive impact on my life. Can you imagine being that person? I had a nurse recently who, when I first met her, she was in training. I'm in a clinical trial, I guess I should back up. and it pretty much beats me up. I go to the hospital every day for a week and take this drug, and it's really kind of nasty. And when I first met her, she was in training. And a couple months ago, she was on her own and taking care of patients individually. And she said, I've got a story I want to tell you, but she was very reluctant to tell me until finally she said, here's the deal. When I first met you, I was going to give up my nursing career. I had lost a friend. I was in a very dark place. She was about 25 years old. And she said, I was going to go to work for Amazon. And then I met you and I saw your story and I saw what you go through every single day. And I knew I was where I was supposed to be. Now, if she would have never told me that story, I would have had no idea that I had that kind of an impact on her life. And I believe that those people are out there all over the place. People that look at you and say, you know what, look what Aldo's doing with, Teach Pitch and stuff like that. But you have no idea who those people are. They're looking at you, they're emulating you. There's an old saying from an old basketball coach many years ago that goes like this: a careful person I want to be, a little person follows me. I dare not go astray for fear they may go the same way. So you never know who's watching you, who's trying to emulate, who's trying to be like you. And I'm not saying that you've got to live your life for somebody else, but I think if you kind of keep that in the back of your mind, that whether you want to be or not, you're a role model for people. Now, teachers do it publicly, but all of us are teachers. If you think about it, all of us have students that look up to us and look for us to set the example. And I think if we would remember that and do that, we'd probably be a whole lot better off.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, that's a beautiful story that you shared with us from the nurse. I think the effect that you have on others, you're indeed not conscious of it. And very often it's very different than you thought it would be yourself.
If you think about it, and I learned this very early on in team sports, that, you're part of something bigger than yourself, especially when you're playing team sports. And you realize that if you don't do your job, if you don't hold up your end, then you're not only letting yourself down, but you're letting your teammates down, your coaches down, your fans down, maybe even your family down. So it's important, I think, for all of us to remember that, and I think society today, and I'm going to make a huge generalization, is a lot about what's in it for me. What can I get out of this? As opposed to the bigger picture. I think back of Tom Brokaw was a news anchor here in the United States, very famous man, wrote a book about the greatest generation. And I've been asked a couple of times, what do you think about the night before you have your foot amputated, you have your leg amputated? And what I thought about was those young men and some women, sitting in those ships off the coast of Normandy, France, the night before D-Day when they're going to go ashore, and how many thousands of them said, you know what, I'm going to sacrifice my life, or I'm going to try to stop what they saw as a situation that was preventing freedom and things like that. And I may lose my life doing that. And thousands of them did. And thousands of Englishmen and Frenchmen and all kinds of people lost their lives. But I think of what courage that took to get into those boats and drive up to that beach, and half of them just got wiped out in the boat, from machine gun fire and things like that. And I know that's very graphic, but that's such a powerful and important thing to realize, that you're part of something bigger than yourself. And if you realize that, and it kind of goes back to what we were just talking about, who's watching you, who's doing that. And if you don't hold up your bargain, if you don't hold up your end, then those dominoes start to fall. And I think we need to be more cognizant of the big picture and not, hey, this is just all about me.
Mm-hmm. And is that what you mean with your second challenge? Because as your second challenge, you described holding ourselves back from success. So do you mean to say, like, it's not always about pursuing your own personal success or what you think is your own personal success? It's putting yourself in a bigger picture. So basically seeing, what's my role here? What's my role in the bigger scope of things? Yeah,
it is. I mean, I kind of learned that very sort of heavy-handedly when I was in college. I had gotten a full scholarship to college to play basketball. And I went to a military school, and, I get there and they shave my head and I'm marching, I'm like, wait a minute, I came here to play basketball, and I was going to quit. And I'd never quit anything in my life. And I was literally walking over to tell the coaches that I was going to leave. But before that, I said, you know what, I'm going to go over to the student center and see if I had any mail. And I had a 7-page handwritten letter from my father, who basically said, kind of pull your head out. You've called home 7 times since you've been there, and not once have you ever asked how anybody here is doing. You're so in your head. You're so in, this is all about me. It's not about you. There's a much bigger picture here. And, he went on to tell me how much he loved me and how proud of me he was and stuff like that. And I mean, I'm literally sitting up at the top of the field house, reading his letter, crying like a baby. I'm like, okay, can't quit now. This was just not something that I could do. And if I hadn't received that letter from him, who knows how much different my life would have turned out. But I took that, and, the biggest impediment we have to being successful is us. People don't want to take responsibility for their own success and happiness. We're always looking to blame someone. I want to blame my parents. I want to blame my teachers. I want to blame my boss. I want to blame my status in life. The greatest quote that I ever heard about the definition of success is from a man by the name of John Wooden. And this is what he said. And he was probably one of the most successful basketball coaches we've ever had in the United States. Here's how he defines success. Success is peace of mind, which is a direct result of self-satisfaction in knowing that you did your best to become the best that you're capable of becoming. It says nothing about winning or anything like that. Success is peace of mind. I've never heard a better definition of success. It has nothing to do with achieving your goals, or did you just do your best? Did you get out there and do your best? And if you did, then you should have peace of mind knowing that whatever happens is what's supposed to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's spot on, because a lot of it comes to having a peace of mind. So it enables you also to listen, and it enables you to trust someone else, and for someone else to trust you. You can't do that if you're stressed out, if you're tunnel visioned into a certain objective that you don't know whether you're going to achieve that, yes or no. You're going to be too self-absorbed. You're going to be too selfish. So I 100% agree that once you have a peace of mind, you're able to sit down and look around and basically say, hey, what's going on here? What does the world look like? What do my direct surroundings look like? And how can I navigate from there into becoming the best that I want to be, that I can be, so to say.
Yeah,
so, yeah,
and I think
yeah.
It is. And you read my 4 truths, and the first one, about controlling your mind. I mean, part of that is, again, I love quotes, so I'm going to give you another one. 1976, and I'm really going to date myself now, U.S. gold medal Olympic swimmer by the name of Shirley Babashoff had one of the greatest quotes I ever heard. And this is what she said. She said, winners think about what they want to happen, and losers think about what they don't want to happen. Winners can override their fear and all that worry, to move forward, to find a reason to keep going. Losers only focus on the negative aspects of competition and can't see the value of pursuing a goal or a dream. If you want to be successful in life, and again, I gave you a definition, you may have a different definition, you need to get out of your head and do the hard, difficult, and let's face it, sometimes embarrassing things that you need to do to become successful.
I want to get a good grasp on the Terry before the cancer diagnosis, because this entire journey of you becoming a motivational speaker, what basically triggered you to wanting to become a motivational speaker? And was this already something that was going on before the diagnosis, or did the diagnosis really awaken something in you? It's like, right, now I'm going to write about this experience, and I'm going to share my ideas, and I'm going to be talking about this on 4 podcast interviews in a day. When did this happen? How did this come together?
Yeah, I mean, you and I were talking before the show about, people who kind of hang a shingle out and say, okay, I'm a life coach, but I'm 18 years old. How much life, do you really have that you're able to coach other people in it? I mean, this was really kind of something that occurred after I was diagnosed. I mean, yes, if you look at my sort of resume, I've done a lot of jobs and have had the opportunity to, I played against Michael Jordan in college. My brother actually coached Michael Jordan's two sons in high school. I've had the opportunity to do a lot of really interesting and fun things in my life, but I didn't feel it was enough to get out there and say, here, let me tell you what I've learned. I really kind of feel that with my cancer journey, I have my story, for lack of a better word, is interesting enough and has enough messages within it that I wanted to share those with people. It's kind of the old Winston Churchill quote of, when you're going through hell, keep going. Well, I was going through hell. So it was like, what, I'm going to keep going and maybe I can educate and help other people learn from my experience. So that was really the impetus for making me say, well, you know what, maybe I can talk to people about this. And I talk to a lot of different groups, but the groups that I like to talk to the most are the young people because they're so malleable. You can form them and you can get them to think about things that, you didn't think about at their age, but now that you did think about them, especially bullying and things like that. I love to talk to kids about bullying because when I was 13 years old, you can't tell this by looking at me now, I'm 6'8" tall. When I was 13 years old, I was 6'5", and I had a size 14 shoe, long, skinny foot, and my ears looked like Dumbo. I mean, my head had not caught up with my ears. And I got teased mercilessly because of the way I looked. But I didn't care because I put my efforts into basketball, which ultimately paid off with a scholarship. And, you look at the people that kids surround themselves with, and I get it. Kids want to be part of the group. They want to, be in the know and things like that. But I've always said, if I didn't know you, Aldo, and I just knew the 5 people you hung around with, the 5 people you were closest to, I could tell you just about everything I needed to know about you because those are the people, that's your inner circle. That's the people you surround yourself with. Why not surround yourself with positive, good people that lift you up, not tear you down? Hey, Tucker, your ears are too big. Yeah, they are. Nothing I can do about it. I'm going to go play basketball.
So your journey throughout your disease, because I just thought of that there might be many people who basically say, well, I'm just going to continue with this. But they also, and it's not because of their own doing, but it's just because that happens, is they accept this enormous decrease in their quality of life. And I think what makes you stand out says, no, I might be in pain, but I'm not going to suffer. I'm just going to keep a positive outlook and I'm going to continue to do the things that I want to do and talk about it. You're not giving up, you're continuing to fight, so to say, which I think is very admirable, right? So what gives you that force? What's your secret here, Terry?
I think the secret is something that I heard back in 1993, but I didn't understand until I got sick. And again, I sort of apologize for using a lot of basketball analogies and stuff, but it's what I know. And I've learned a lot, not just about the game, but about life and myself. 1993, there was a college basketball coach by the name of Jim Valvano, and he coached at North Carolina State. And he was dying of cancer. And he received an award at the ESPYs for courage. And he gave an unbelievably great speech. You can YouTube it if you want. It's definitely worth listening to. But one of the things he said was, cancer can take away all my faculties, but it can't touch my mind, it can't touch my heart, and it can't touch my soul. And I didn't understand that in 1993. I didn't have cancer back then. But now, again, another nurse story, nurse and basketball, my two stories. I had a nurse who asked me one day, what was it like to lose your foot and then to lose your leg? And I told her it wasn't easy. It hasn't been easy. I'm still trying to learn to walk on a prosthetic and mostly in a wheelchair. But what I told her was, I am so much more than the sum of my parts. And I just want people to realize that this is just a facade, a vessel of who you really are. It is contained inside that. Because cancer can't touch my mind. It can't touch my heart, and it cannot touch my soul. And that's who Terry Tucker is. And that's what allows me to go on. You can cut all this stuff off. That's just the outside. That's not who I am. Now, granted, when I was in law enforcement, I knew people who'd been cops for 35 years, and their identity was tied to that gun and that badge. That's not me. This is just my body. You can do whatever you want to it, because that's not who I am. And who I am allows me to continue to move forward.
Again, that's beautiful and so admirable. And there's such strength in your message and such strength in you that I think is exemplary. Let's talk a little bit about your book, Sustainable Excellence. When did you decide to start writing? I mean, the speaking part, I think you had down already very early on. When did it change into writing?
So really the book was born out of two conversations I had. So one was with a former basketball player that I'd had who'd moved to Colorado where my wife and I lived. She moved here with her fiance and we'd had dinner with him. And I remember saying to her, I'm really excited that you're living close to us and I can watch you find and live your purpose. And she got real quiet for a while and she kind of looked at me and she's like, well, Coach, what do you think my purpose is? I said, I have no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. It should be about finding that purpose and living it. So that was one conversation. And then I had another conversation with a young man in college who connected with me on LinkedIn and wanted to know what I thought were the most important things he should learn to not only be successful in his job or in business, but in life overall. And I didn't want to give him the, get up early, help others, work hard. Not that those aren't important. Those are incredibly important. But I wanted to see if I could come up with things that maybe were a little bit different. So I thought about it for a while. I wrote some notes. And eventually I had these 10 principles, these 10 thoughts, and I sent them to him. And then I stepped back and I looked at it and I said, well, I've got a life story that fits under this principle, or I know someone whose life emulates that principle. So literally had my leg amputated in April of 2020, started chemotherapy for the tumors in my lungs in June of 2020. And during that 3-month period where I was healing, I sat down at the computer every day and I started to build stories underneath those principles. And that's how Sustainable Excellence came to be.
Nice. And it has good reviews. It's been well received. Lots of people are talking about it. It's a help for many people. Are you happy with the results?
I am very happy with the results. And I remember when it was released, I was like, I'd never written a book before. I'd never had one published. I was like, I got to sell books. I got to sell books. I got to sell books. And I'd had a best-selling author over in the UK who I'd connected with, who kind of pulled me aside, so to speak. And he said, no, Terry, you're missing the point. He said, your job is not to sell books. Your job is to help people. If you help people, the books will sell themselves. And I was so glad that he said that to me. Having somebody who understood that business was really beneficial for me.
Yeah, I think he's right. I mean, you buy the person, not necessarily the book, right? It's your message. And if people can follow you and admire your message and your vision on the world, the book will follow. So what are you currently doing? I'm aware you have loads of treatment every month and the treatment makes you to be out of circulation for 2 weeks a month. Is that correct? Or one and a half?
For a week. I'm in treatment for a week and then I have 2 weeks off. And so it's a 3-week cycle.
Yeah.
So, I talked about the first book being about success. I'm thinking about another book. I'm sort of compiling things right now. I have not started to write, but the thing I think the second book will be focused on is another S word, and that's significance. What we do, that's success. You're successful with what you do at podcasting, with Teach Pitch and all that. Maybe I'm a successful author or policeman or whatever it is. But significance is what we do for other people. I think you can be both. I think you can be successful and significant, but I'd like the second book to be more about significance, about how people can be significant in other people's lives. So that's my goal on the back end. I don't know if my disease will let me get there, but you've got to have goals. I hope I'm learning until the day that I die.
It has to be. You need to keep on writing, Terry, because you're helping so many people with your writing and with your positive outlook on things. That is contagious. And I hope that people who encounter struggles take a good look at you and say, well, how about this for a struggle, being at the very deep end of the valley and then climbing your way out of it with such positive rigor and such a great energizing vision. So yeah, no more excuses from anyone else. Most definitely not. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. I want to also mention your website, motivationalcheck.com. so that people, if they want to know a little bit more about you, then they can go to your website or read your book, which is available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble as well, I believe. So
yeah, and Apple iBooks, pretty much
Apple
anywhere
iBooks.
You can get a book online.
Anywhere you go. So that's great. We're almost at the end of this interview. I do have two more questions, and I ask those to all of my guests. One is around reading. So which book would you recommend to our listeners to read? Which book would you say, like, okay, this is the one that inspired me, and this is the one you should be reading as well?
So I've alluded a couple of times. I talked about John Wooden's definition of success and things like that. When I was about 13 or 14 years old, I just happened to come across this biography of John Wooden's, Coach Wooden, called They Call Me Coach. And Coach Wooden was an incredibly successful basketball coach, but he was so much better as a human being. One of the things he's noted for is his pyramid of success. And that's just building blocks of things that he believes. And his book goes into what those building blocks are, what they mean, and how you can use them in your life. So that was really the first time that, again, that fuse got lit for me. Like, man, I can't put this book down. I just want to keep reading it. So John Wooden's They Call Me Coach is the book I would recommend to you.
They Call Me Coach. A very good recommendation and very heartfelt. So thank you for sharing that one. And the last question is, now let's turn the tables. This is your podcast series. Who would you want to invite?
Do they have to be alive?
No, it could be just anyone on your wish list, you know?
So I love to read biographies. And I think that was one of the things that attracted me to being a negotiator was I like to try to figure out what makes people tick. And we had a president here in the United States during World War II. Roosevelt was kind of the guy here in the United States, President Roosevelt. And his vice president was a man by the name of Harry Truman. And Truman was kind of a, we'll put you on the ticket just because we need these votes. But Truman had no chance of ever being president until Roosevelt died one day. And all of a sudden, Harry Truman is a great example of a guy who pretty much had been a failure his entire life. He was in World War I. He was a haberdasher, a clothing person that had his businesses fail. His wife didn't want him to be in politics. I remember reading part of his story was about how when he ran, he was from Missouri, the state of Missouri in the United States. He campaigned on, I will have a paved road within a mile of every farm in my district. And he found out that the two other county judges, there were him and two others, were taking kickbacks. And so he had two choices. Well, if I blow the whistle, the project will stop and no roads will be built. Or I can say nothing, let them take their kickbacks and keep my promise to the farmers of having a paved road within a mile of their farm. He chose not to say anything. And I just think he was a man of faith. He was a man of conviction. He dropped the 2 atomic bombs on Japan, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So I think he's somebody who I would love to be able to sit down and just have a conversation with.
Wow, that's a great guest. So They Call Me Coach and Harry Truman as a podcast guest. Terry Tucker, thank you so much for this interview. Thank you so much for your positive outlook. I'm convinced you truly are a motivational speaker and writer, and I wish you nothing but the best in everything that you do. I'm looking forward to reading your book about significance, so please do start writing that one. And it's been a great pleasure having you. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for having me on. From a public point of view, I just want to thank you because again, my purpose now is to get as much goodness, positivity, and love out there. And it's good people like you that allow me to do that through our conversation. So thank you for allowing me to be here.
Terry Tucker, thanks so much. If you liked this episode of the Teach Pitch podcast, then it would mean the absolute world if you could share it with your friends and/or give it a short review on your preferred podcast platform. The more you share your ideas about these interviews, the more people will find out about them. So do let us know what you think. We'd be very, very grateful.
Special thanks to Kevin MacLeod for our beautiful theme music, Le Grand Chase. This podcast was produced and edited by Natalie Piles. Project coordination by Inva Cheney.